The National Desk, America's News, now.
A question of age.
I'll just say it. Biden's too old.
Presidential candidate Nikki Haley isn't holding back in her recent political ad blasting the president's age. Migrant flights.
Federal government does need to do something, and I know Texas is taking a stand, but I just don't think it's right to just send them out there.
How Texas is dealing with a flood of illegal migrants into the state. And teens arrested. 5 students charged in the beating of a classmate, all caught on camera.
From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we start this weekend following the very latest in the 2024 presidential election. The latest polling showing former President Donald Trump and President Biden are the frontrunners in their parties. Trump's first test within the Republican Party is less than 3 weeks away with the Iowa caucuses. The latest Iowa poll has Trump at 50%, which is 33 points above Republican candidate Nikki Haley. At the same time, Haley is gaining some ground on former President Trump in New Hampshire. A St. Anselm College survey shows Trump at 44% and Haley at 30%. It is the closest statewide primary race so far, but Trump is rolling out new ads targeting Haley.
Now Trump's hitting me. Even though he said a few days ago I wasn't surging, but yet he's got now attack ads going up against me.
On the Democratic side, a new Axios report details frustration within the Biden administration about how the president views his age. And polls have shown voters are concerned too. The National Desk Atra El-Nashar reports on how that's factoring into the 2024 presidential election.
In a new ad, Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley isn't mincing words.
I'll just say it. Biden's too old.
The 51-year-old former South Carolina governor has gained momentum in early voting states, but still trails 77-year-old former president and primary frontrunner Donald Trump.
It's great to be back here in Nevada.
Though she calls out President Biden by name in the ad, Haley also takes a thinly veiled swing at other older candidates.
We need term limits, mental competency tests.
She gets to talk about the issue without actually being explicit about who she's talking about. This would affect Trump, this would affect Biden, this would affect a lot of the older senators who are increasingly unpopular, a lot of older House members for that matter too.
For President Biden, the age issue looms especially large, with scrutiny placed on moments like this.
You could say even this harder than getting a ticket to the Renaissance tour or Britney's tour. She's down in, it's kind of warm in Brazil right now.
According to a new report by Axios, current and former aides say Biden is extraordinarily energetic for his age, but his repeated insistence that he feels so young can draw eye rolls. Some current and former aides believe Biden doesn't realize how old he can come across. The president also reportedly pushes for more travel and events than his aides think he should. Now, in the past, when asked to respond to voters' concerns about his age, the president said that they should watch him and see how he carries out the job.
Do they care about it? Yes. But do they care about it enough to choose someone else over him? That's something that remains to be seen, particularly on issues that affect their day-to-day lives in a way that the president's age doesn't.
There's no precedent for the choice voters are poised to make in the general election between two men who would either be, again, the oldest or second oldest to take the office. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
President Biden visited Milwaukee to highlight his administration's support for Black-owned small businesses. According to the Small Business Administration, total loans and total loan dollars to Black-owned small businesses have more than doubled under the Biden administration. The visit to the Wisconsin Black Chamber of Commerce comes as the president looks to win more support among Black voters amid his re-election campaign.
When Black small businesses grow, everything benefits. The community benefits, everyone benefits, not a joke. And it gives hope and prospects for people.
The president is hoping to energize voters as he struggles with poor approval ratings on his handling of the economy. Meantime, President Biden's approval rating just hit a record low. Right now, just 34% of Americans approve of his job, 61% disapprove. Biden also losing confidence from voting blocs that have traditionally supported Democrats. A Siena College poll found 30% of registered black voters disapprove of his performance. 87% of black voters supported Biden in 2020. A little later, we'll have an interview with a black voter who is facing backlash for speaking out against President Biden. Now to the border crisis. Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez says his state is beyond the breaking point. He posted this video from his visit to Eagle Pass, where 26,000 migrants were currently in custody being processed. He also shared a video he took from inside the Border Patrol's Firefly Tent Processing Center there, where a DHS official tried to block his camera. Texas Governor Greg Abbott chartered a plane to fly roughly 120 migrants to the sanctuary city of Chicago. National Desk reporter Jennifer Cuevas reports from El Paso.
The office of Governor Greg Abbott confirming they are behind the flights. Abbott states he is aligning with the Biden administration's practice of flying migrants out of Texas to sanctuary cities. Many people declined an on-camera interview, but one supporter applauded the governor, believing that other cities should also have to deal with the migrant influx, just like Texas. Currently, there are not many migrants at the El Paso International Airport. They can be identified by their attire, typically wearing sweatpants and gray crew necks after being released from CBP processing centers. Migrants in the video fly themselves out with the assistance of sponsors in other parts of the country.
Federal government does need to do something, and I know Texas is taking a stand, but I just don't think it's right to just send them out there.
The footage you are now seeing is from the first plane dispatched to Chicago by Governor Greg Abbott. Departing from El Paso with over 120 people on board, the governor's office asserts that the migrants willingly boarded the flight, having signed a consent waiver. However, some people I spoke with today expressed disagreement with the governor's actions. This flight comes after the city of Chicago passed an ordinance cracking down on buses coming from Texas with immigrant passengers. Over the last year, Texas has bused over 80,000 immigrants to Democratic-led cities across the U.S. Reporting from El Paso, Texas, I'm Jennifer Cuevas.
At the same time, there's growing concerns about a massive backlog of migrants being released into the U.S. Fox News is reporting a Colombian woman who crossed illegally was told to check in with an immigration office 8 years from now in 2031. A Democratic congressional candidate from Chicago now calling out his city leadership and the White House.
They're not calling out Secretary Mayorkas for letting asylum seekers come to this country under false pretense and then giving them court cases 10 years from now. They're calling on the governor, who's clearly frustrated, who even has Democratic city mayors begging for help as they are being overrun on a daily basis.
In Washington, the Senate left for its holiday break with no deal in place for increased border protections. Senate negotiators in the White House plan to hold virtual meetings over the holidays, but there will be no vote until at least the middle of next month.
The most complicated part of it, actually, is the border. I think we haven't passed a significant immigration bill since Reagan's second term.
And our goal is to get something done as soon as we get back. We're going to figure out the best way to get something done.
West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin called it a failure to leave without a deal, saying in part, "This is not rocket science. We should not be abandoning our responsibilities in favor of a holiday vacation. The American people deserve better." Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin planning to move a historic Confederate-era memorial to a state park. A federal judge ruled the statue at Arlington Cemetery could be removed after several lawsuits to keep it there. Just across the Arlington Memorial Bridge, the Lincoln Memorial was vandalized with anti-Israel graffiti. Red paint sprayed across the steps near the reflecting pool. The National Park Service says it will take several days to clean and should be fully restored. No arrests announced yet. The City Council in Baltimore is getting slammed after rejecting a resolution condemning Hamas and anti-Semitism. 4 council members made the decision to abstain from the resolution, claiming it didn't explicitly include language condemning discrimination against the Islamic community. The Jewish councilman who made the resolution called them out.
This is the double standard that we have grown to live with our entire life. And, you know, it sends the message that Hate is only okay if it's being perpetuated against Jews.
The Baltimore City Council has gotten many emails criticizing members for failing to condemn anti-Semitism. In Florida, 5 teenagers now arrested and charged in the beating of a teen boy. The attack happening at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, the scene of the February 2018 mass shooting. Reporter Victoria DeCardenas with our West Palm Beach station has more.
Video of this attack is still circulating online, police calling it a media spectacle. In it, a student from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is seen being slammed into the ground by some of his classmates. And according to police, this beating stems from an earlier fight. The Coral Springs Police Department is investigating a teen brawl that unfolded at the same school where 17 people were killed by a gunman in 2018. Last week, 4 suspects were arrested. The 5th teen turned himself in Monday. A 6th suspect is still sought. The violent beating happened at an off-campus parking lot near Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School last week. The suspects pick up and slam an 18-year-old student on the ground. It appears knocking him unconscious. An eyewitness recorded the violence on a cell phone. We've stopped the video before the victim makes contact with the pavement.
I was there when they started chasing him, but when I left, he was just in an ambulance leaving, so I heard that he fractured his skull or something.
According to police affidavits, the victim asked his friends to walk with him after school. He was afraid of being jumped as there was a fight the week before.
It just happened, then his friends obviously helped him get up, make sure he was okay. 5
boys are charged with felony battery. Police are still looking for the 6th. The victim's name is not being released. He is said to be recovering. No word on what the motive is for this attack or what prompted the first fight. In West Palm Beach, Florida, I'm Victoria DeCardenas reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Also in Florida, a man has pleaded guilty to threatening to kill a Supreme Court Justice. Neil Sidwani facing up to 5 years in prison after calling the court and leaving a threatening voicemail. The Justice Department did not identify which justice was the target.
Global demand for coal, which is currently the largest source for electricity generation and CO2 emissions, has risen to an all-time high this year, but that could be changing soon. I'm back with Courtney from the Fact Check team. How much coal is consumed in 2023?
So according to the International Energy Agency, the global demand for coal passed 8.5 billion tons for the first time, which is a 1.4% increase from last year. China currently accounts for over half of that demand, but not every country's consumption is on the rise. Several have actually made efforts to cut back on how much coal they use.
And which countries have cut back?
The U.S. and the EU have record drops this year of around 20% each, but other countries have increased their demand, including India by 8% and China by 5%.
So what does the future global demand for coal look like?
So the IEA expects coal demand to decrease by more than 2% by 2026, largely because they expect countries, especially China, to start relying on other renewable energy options.
All right, Courtney, thanks. For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to Courtney's sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Coming up next, are black voters losing faith in the president? The executive director of BLM Incorporated explains why he won't be voting for President Biden. A number of polls show black voters losing faith in President Joe Biden. A survey from Jen Ford showed Biden losing nearly 40% of the pivotal voting bloc that helped him win in 2020. One voter who was part of the Black Lives Matter movement says he won't vote for Biden, now getting backlash for speaking out publicly. BLM Incorporated Executive Director Mark Fisher spoke to Jan Jeffcoat.
You threw your support behind former President Trump. Why? Well, I believe that Donald Trump, he speaks the loudest and the clearest to the needs of my community. He offers us and myself a different perspective. And so we want to entertain that different perspective.
And we see in the polls right here showing black voters shifting away from the Democratic Party. Why do you think that is? Why now? What are the biggest issues that you see facing your community that are not getting addressed and that you think Republicans can do better?
Well, I feel like, for starters, the economy, number one. When you look at the prices, they're just ridiculous. I've never paid so much for gas. Food, rent is through the roof, I believe that crime is a problem. The cities are being overran by crime, poverty. And, if you look at a city like Anacostia, you got 25% of the population could classify as poverty or borderline poverty, and then border security. That's a major issue. It's like a free-for-all at the border, and, I don't see any end in sight under the Democrats. And I think people see what's going on and they're getting frustrated.
What kind of backlash have you received since coming out publicly, and why did you?
Well, I got, a backlash, but I also got support. And, the backlash, it's par for the course. I believe that, when you go against the grain, when you stand up and think independently and you think outside of these think tanks and these group thinks, you're going to get backlash because the narratives are already set. And when you don't fit into these nice, neat narratives that are driven by the media or by the two-party system, you're going to get backlash. And I'm an independent thinker. I'm not left. I'm not right. I'm a person. I'm a human being with thoughts, ideas, and concepts. So, this is just something you have to, I'm built for it. Leaders have to be, ready to lead. They can't be afraid to be ridiculed, to be, set apart or to be leaders.
Did you vote for Biden in 2020?
Excuse me?
Did you
yes,
vote for?
I did.
You did. Why did you vote for him in 2020?
Because I was drinking the same Kool-Aid that the whole Democratic Party was drinking. And, I feel like that at this point, nothing is going to change under the Democratic Party. The media does a great job of driving these narratives of creating this alternate boogeyman and fear-mongering. And for so long, we felt like, well, why would we vote for a racist party, even if they have good policies? Would you vote for a racist with good policies? Of course not. And that's the thinking of a black person. But at the same time, the Democratic Party is what I call pimping for power. And they just continue to use us for 200 years under the Democratic Party. Nothing has changed. Ghettos are still around and it's still being neglected as ever. So it's just in front of us to see. We just need to open our eyes and have the courage to make a move.
The National BLM organization, Mark, has denounced your endorsement of Trump. They've tried to distance themselves from you. What's your response to that?
My response is I have no response because they don't merit acknowledgement, much less a response. When you think about the national group or, the global network, this is a Soros-funded organization that has been proven to be a dishonest criminal enterprise. They have affiliate chapters that are still looking for accountability and redress for the over $90 million that was misappropriated and, siphoned off into building luxury, properties, mansions, and over-the-top parties. So I have no response to that. These are self-described trained Marxists who intend to destroy the nuclear family as we know it. So I have no response.
All right, Mark, pleasure talking to you this morning. The BLM Incorporated Executive Director and Black Lives Matter Rhode Island co-founder, Mark Fisher. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Still ahead here on the National Desk, a Chick-fil-A fight one state trying to force the restaurant to open on Sundays, going against a decades-long company policy. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. We start in Washington, D.C., where police officers are now learning new vital tools for crisis management.
Out the units marked on the scene. Time is 11:41 hours. Units use caution.
At the MPD Academy,
you don't want to destroy your life.
D.C. police officers fill a classroom to participate in a lifelike scenario that officers may respond to on the streets.
The great thing about ICAD is very scenario-based. It's a very robust curriculum. Like the chief was mentioning, 16 hours, or a classroom discussion, and we go through scenarios.
It's a program called Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics. It's being used in 30 states, 120 law enforcement agencies, and now here in the district.
I think it's something that is necessary for our officers to have additional tools in order to do their jobs effectively.
Chief Pamela Smith said the goal is to help officers handle situations involving weapons in a new way.
Every night, thousands of Oregonians go to sleep without a roof over their head. The latest point-in-time count data shows that number is increasing. Jimmy Jones, executive director of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, says it's a sad but not surprising reality.
I think a lot of us who've been doing the work expected this, after the pandemic, and we have been warning people for a long time after the pandemic, but with each passing opportunity we get to measure the population, it continues to grow, unfortunately.
Oregon Governor Tina Kotek says that growth was likely caused by the pandemic.
We had a challenge before the pandemic started, and it just exacerbated it, right?
Whether a proposed bill requiring throughway rest stop vendors to be open 7 days a week is constitutional becomes one of the questions now being debated. For some, 6 days of the popular Chick-fil-A restaurant is good enough.
If I can get Chick-fil-A 6 days a week and not get it 1 day a week, I'm not hurt.
This was the sentiment spoken by the majority of people at the Chittenango service area. Truck drivers who stop at service areas frequently saying that Chick-fil-A should be allowed to stay.
It's perfectly fine. People know it. There's Burger King in there. There's, other places. Popeyes, you can stop somewhere else. You can get off the highway.
Coming up next, national security risk, how the sale of one of the largest companies will affect the U.S. economy and possibly national security. New details on the sale of one of the largest American companies to a foreign country. As the National Desk Christine Frizzell reports, it's bringing up big questions about what it will mean for our economy and our national security.
It's part of its name and its deep-rooted history.
Since 1901, our products and the people who made them have been embedded in American life.
So the $14 billion sale of U.S. Steel, started by J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie, among others, to the Japanese company Nippon Steel, was met with swift backlash.
It's absolutely outrageous that they have sold themselves to a foreign nation and a company. Can't do that. Steel is always about security.
While it will keep its headquarters in Pittsburgh, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Missouri's Josh Hawley writing a letter to the Treasury Department, warning of dire implications for the industrial base of the United States, adding the transaction was not made with U.S. national security in mind.
See you again.
While Japan is one of the United States' closest allies, this sale is just the latest on a growing list of iconic American brands being bought by a foreign entity. Even one of the big three U.S. automakers, Chrysler, is now owned by Stellantis, a company based in the Netherlands. Anheuser-Busch was sold to the Belgian company InBev, and Smithfield Pork, started in Virginia in the 1930s, is now owned by China, which also owns nearly 350,000 acres of U.S. farmland, less than 1% of foreign-held land, but still very concerning for many.
There are people who are tied to the Communist Party of China, who is an adversary of ours, actually purchasing property. It could be a coincidence that some of the properties they've purchased are really close to some of our military installations, but we want to make sure that we're not even in the position where there's a real risk.
China's scooping up of land and businesses and its increased competition on electric cars is bringing up memories for some of the political and economic tensions of the 1980s that the United States had with Japan. Tensions expected to stick around for the foreseeable future. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk. America's News Now.
Still ahead here on the National Desk, paycheck to paycheck. Find out how many Americans are just getting by each month. Plus, doom spending, how some people are turning to shopping in order to deal with stress. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Fighting inflation, minimum wage is set to increase in more than 20 states. But will that help struggling Americans to keep up with inflation? Housing Outlook, find out if now's the time for future home buyers to purchase their dream home. And budget surplus, our fact check team takes a look at how many states came out ahead in 2023. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Gatton. It's great to be here with you. New data indicates the majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. A new Lending Club report found that 62% of U.S. adults have just enough to get by each pay period and also have more credit card debt. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is proposing a new minimum wage hike bill, raising the federal minimum wage to $17 an hour, but it could come at a big cost to the economy. The Congressional Budget Office analyzed that the bill could raise wages for 9.7 million people, but would also chase about 700,000 people out of jobs. But this new year could mean a pay bump for certain workers with the minimum wage set to go up in more than 20 states. The National Desk, Janae Bowens, explains if it's enough to keep up with inflation.
Wealth management advisor for First Financial Group, Randy Jones, says a bump in the minimum wage is a step in the right direction.
I think it's a start. I don't know if it's really enough for everybody.
The question of is it enough might depend on where you live. Michigan's minimum wage will go from $10.10 to $10.33. Now, I did some math. If a minimum wage worker works 40 hours per week the entire year, they'll take home around $19,800. According to research from Go Baking Rates, the living wage for a single person in Michigan is over $50,000.
Going forward in the future, we'll be indexing the minimum wage for the first time ever to inflation, so families can finally start getting ahead.
Now, New York minimum wage workers will see some bumps from $14.20 to $15, but in certain places like New York City, it'll go to $16. Even at $16 per hour, that's a little above $30,700 per year.
For some people, they'll feel that it still needs to be more. For some people, they take what they can get currently.
25 states and Washington, D.C. will raise their minimum wage in 2024. And get this, beginning in April next year, California's minimum wage for their state's fast food workers will increase to $20 per hour, but that's still below what financial experts say is a living wage. In Washington, I'm Janae Bowens.
Millions of student loan borrowers are not paying their debts. The Education Department reported nearly 9 million borrowers missed their first student loan payment after the pandemic-related pause ended this fall. That means roughly 40% of the 22 million borrowers who had bills due in October did not make a payment by mid-November. Meantime, the November retail sales report showed Americans spent far more than economists expected, but this increased spending could have a dark side. National Desk Angelo Brown explains.
Economists are calling it doom spending. What does that mean? It means Americans are spending more money because of stress, money they simply don't have. Nervous about the economy? Your neighbor may feel the same way as well. A survey from Credit Karma found a whopping 96% of Americans are concerned with the current state of the economy. But at the same time, we're spending more. Ted Rossman, Bankrate.
It was pretty broad-based strength, I would say, for retail in November. We saw e-commerce up more than 10%. We saw bars and restaurants up double digits, electronic stores, health and personal care stores. There was a lot to like in the November retail sales report.
Those numbers exceeding expectations. The National Retail Federation says Black Friday and Cyber Monday brought in a record high 200 million shoppers. But that's not the whole story. Doom spending, other times called funflation, shows more Americans are prioritizing experiences and spending more money as a result, even if it's tougher on their finances.
Concert tickets cost more, sports tickets cost more, going to Disney World costs more, and yet people are doing it anyway.
According to this Credit Karma survey, over a quarter of Americans, 27%, doom spend to deal with stress. This comes as credit card debt topped $1 trillion nationwide back in August. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Growing concerns about U.S. energy after the Biden administration released its 5-year offshore drilling program, which features the fewest oil and gas lease sales in history. The plan allows for just 3 oil and gas lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico between 2025 and 2029. President of U.S. Oil and Gas Association Tim Stewart said, with this announcement, the administration has shut down 1 of 5 barrels of future production. Imagine if they announced they were shutting down 20% of our agricultural production or 20% of our manufacturing capacity. There would be drastic economic consequences. It is the same situation here. For the first time in 5 months, there was a boost in home builder confidence after a decline in mortgage rates. The National Desk Atra El-Nashar looks at the housing market outlook for next year.
Prospective homebuyers who felt priced out of the market may soon be able to come off the sidelines. Experts at the National Association of Home Builders feel confident mortgage rates have peaked for the time being.
A lot of reason to be optimistic that we're going to see those rates continue to fall into the mid 6s, maybe even as low as 6% by the end of 2024.
Last week, the Federal Reserve announced it would not raise interest rates this month.
Activity in the housing sector has flattened out and remains well below the levels of a year ago.
But mortgage rates are just one part of the equation. Home prices have been enough to box out buyers, especially first-time buyers. Redfin called 2023 the least affordable year for home buying on record. Someone earning the median U.S. income of about $78,000, buying a median-priced home of about $408,000, would have had to spend roughly 41% of their earnings on monthly housing costs. Experts say this is all about inventory. Owners of existing homes who locked in a low rate during the pandemic, for the most part, don't want to move. And builders have been stymied by high construction costs. In 2024, it's all expected to start to turn around. The National Association of Home Builders expects a 5% increase in new construction of single-family homes.
We need to build our way out of the supply crisis. We are looking into the second half of next year before those homes come online.
Most economists have scrapped predictions of a U.S. recession. Morgan Stanley agrees it's unlikely. But if one were to occur, its economists say that could send home prices down by as much as 8%. Plenty of volatility remains, but buyers seem positioned for a more promising, though still expensive, 2024. In Washington, I'm Atrell Nishar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
The CEOs of Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount have begun meetings about a potential merger. They reportedly included talks on how to compete against rival streaming services Netflix and Disney+. If completed, it could combine several major entertainment and new companies like CBS News and CNN. The Department of Energy announced $530 million in grants for modernizing buildings that it claims would improve energy bills. But the American Gas Association says the climate impact will be minimal and expects that you could have to pay more to upgrade your appliances in the future.
In 5 years, around Christmas 2028, if you have to replace your gas furnace, you may be saddled with hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of additional costs to upgrade that equipment to comply with this rule.
The AGA is attempting to challenge the new regulation in court after it says the Department of Energy mostly ignored its concerns. A Michigan city banned residents from using gas-powered leaf blowers. Ann Arbor's City Council unanimously approving the decision despite public hearings in which small businesses said using electric leaf blowers will cost them thousands of dollars. Gas-powered leaf blowers would be fully banned there in 2028. The state of Maine had to hit the brakes on a plan to ban gas cars. Maine's Environmental Board was set to vote on a proposal to push new car sales in electric, but the vote was pushed back due to a power outage from this week's strong storms. Also, the proposal date was pushed back to 2028. The White House is considering raising tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in an effort to help boost EV production in the U.S. The Biden administration has kept many Trump-era tariffs on China in place. Global shipping companies concerned about the Biden administration's plan to protect commercial ships in the Red Sea. A new Navy coalition was formed to escort and protect ships from increasing Houthi rebel attacks. But Reuters is reporting the companies have received very few details on the plan. As a result, many companies now dropping Red Sea routes altogether, including shipping giant Maersk. It will reroute all ships around Africa, which make trips at least 10 days longer. That could have an impact here at home. Furniture company IKEA, just the latest store, expecting delays and supply shortages because of the changes. IKEA said it is also working with logistics partners to find new shipping routes. A leader of the Houthi rebels said they plan to increase ship attacks and even target U.S. warships if Washington takes direct action against Yemen.
States run a budget deficit when their spending is greater than their revenue, but that is not always the case. Sometimes they come out ahead. I'm back now with Connor and the fact check team looking into a snapshot of these latest figures.
Sure, Scott. Now, the most complete numbers are from fiscal year 2023, so let's take a look at those. According to the National Association of State Budget Officers, most states ended the fiscal year 2023 with a budget surplus, and 46 states reported their general fund revenue collections exceeded their original estimates. And this marks the third consecutive year that's happened for most states.
All right, so then what's behind the surpluses? Why are they having these good news figures?
Sure, Scott. Well, simply put, states continue to outperform revenue expectations, which are influenced by things like differences in tax structures, industries in the state, demographic shifts, and tax policy changes.
What do states do with that budget surplus?
Well, each state is different, but they can use it to pay down debt, invest in education or other priorities, cut taxes, or build up rainy day funds, which basically function as a savings account. And according to Pew Trust, rainy day funds hit an all-time high in 38 states at the end of fiscal year 2023.
All right, Connor, thank you very much. And for more on this fact check team topic, including links to their sources, just scan the QR code right there on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Still to come here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from Colorado's Supreme Court barring Donald Trump from the 2024 primary ballot to cargo ships in the Red Sea attacked.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The Bureau's correspondents are here to share their insights on the stories they've been covering. Colorado's Supreme Court barring Donald Trump from the 2024 presidential primary ballot there. Chief political correspondent Scott Thuman, what's the political and legal fallout of this ruling?
Yeah, there's a lot, Stephen, on both fronts. So let's first talk about the legal side of it. You've got other states that may want to try and keep Trump off the ballot and may follow suit. So there are expected to be other issues for him in the future. Now, the difficulty is interpreting the Constitution and the 14th Amendment. There are a lot of legal scholars that say, while it does prohibit people who have taken the oath to defend the Constitution, defend the Union, but then are guilty of what they call insurrection, and not legally guilty, but just accused of it, and in their eyes guilty of it, that they can be barred from being elected again to office. Now, that's an argument that's probably going to be decided by the Supreme Court. So a lot of people expect this is very quickly going to go to that level, that the states don't have the right, only the federal government would, and even that is open to some interpretation in this particular instance because Trump has not gone through the entire court process and then, of course, been convicted. Now, on the political front, it's interesting because, ironically, you have fellow Republicans, people who are running against Trump to try and get the nomination to run for the White House, who are defending him in this particular instance, saying the voters should decide whether or not Trump is going to become president, not justices or judges or anyone else in the legal system. And so you kind of have this rallying around him, despite the fact that people are saying, I want to beat him, I don't want him to win, but it's not for a court to decide that.
We'll all be watching the Supreme Court in the next few weeks to see what happens there. Meanwhile, the surge of migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border continues at a record pace. National correspondent Christine Frizzell, what are lawmakers doing about what many have labeled a crisis at the border?
Well, Steve, the short answer is nothing at the moment. They have left Washington to go back to their districts for the Christmas holiday, and they will not be returning, at least are not scheduled to return until January 8th. Now, we did see the Senate stay in session a little longer than we expected. We saw a handful of senators, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, working on a fix for this, really trying to get some changes of border policy attached to a bill that would also provide aid for Ukraine and Israel. This is something the Biden administration said was desperately needed because funding for Ukraine runs out at the end of the year. They worked diligently. They made progress on a lot of things, but they didn't get it done. So nothing's going to be done before the new year, and this is very worrisome. Just last week, we saw another record at the border, a single day. 12,600 migrants were apprehended at the border. That is a record following record-breaking weeks and months. Border towns and cities are just overwhelmed. They say that this is unsustainable. We're hearing that from both Democrats and Republicans. And just last week, we saw a sort of border town versus big city battle play out when the mayor of Chicago said, Texas can no longer send buses without coordinating with us. So what did the governor of Texas do? He started putting migrants there on planes instead. This is getting ugly, and it's becoming a really big burden on, again, the entire country.
And work on solutions taking a holiday for a couple of weeks, but it doesn't seem like the problem is taking a holiday. And a potential economic bombshell on the horizon as ships in the Red Sea, cargo ships in the Red Sea, continue to be attacked. National correspondent Audra Elnashar, what's going on there and how could this affect the U.S. economy?
Right, so these attacks are being launched by Houthi rebels. It's a group based in Yemen that's backed by Iran. They're launching missiles and drones at these cargo ships going through the Red Sea. It's a really important shipping route, one of the most important in the world. About 30% of the world's shipping containers go through that route. The Houthis say they'll do it, and they'll keep doing it until Israel stops its operations in Gaza. So how does that impact the U.S.? For the most part, for now, U.S. consumers should not expect too much of a disruption in their everyday lives and their everyday shopping, with the exception of potentially energy prices, because oil is priced on a global market. We saw after weeks of declines, consecutive declines in gas prices interrupted this week. Gas went up about 2-3 cents So not a huge deal, but it was certainly because oil prices rose this week on the news that BP is rerouting its vessels through South of Africa. So that's going to add up to a month of delays. Maersk, a shipping giant out of Denmark, is also rerouting many of its vessels. IKEA says that its products are going to be delayed for the same reason. So to address this, the Pentagon launched called Operation Prosperity Guardian with about a dozen other countries that'll basically help escort these commercial ships through the Red Sea so that that global commerce can go on as usual. So we certainly don't expect a repeat of the supply chain disruptions, of course, that we saw during the pandemic, saw again during Russia's invasion of Ukraine during the earlier days. But the longer this goes on, if they were to escalate these attacks, the worse that could get, and we could see more of an impact here in the U.S.
Right, a lot of fingers crossed that as the work continues to stabilize the U.S. economy, this doesn't have an impact long term. Audra, Christine, Scott, thank you all for your hard work and your great reporting. Happy holidays. Back to you.
Up next here on the National Desk, a real-life Grinch. Several $1,000s worth of presents stolen from a home right before Christmas. And closed slopes find out how ski season is in jeopardy after roads are damaged by floods in Maine. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From Tennessee's pricey power grid upgrade to avoid rolling blackouts this winter to major flooding damage in Maine. We are taking the pulse of America, but we start with a thief stealing from families in North Carolina.
To take somebody's presents out from under their tree the week of Christmas is just, it's insane to me.
After returning home on Monday, Michael Proctor realized his back door was open. It started to set in what happened when he noticed his master bedroom was ransacked. It didn't take long for him to sweep the house and see the front door was kicked in.
The door was deadbolted, so he completely kicked it through. The hinges that were here are laid out in the middle of the floor.
And dozens of Christmas presents under the tree for his friends and family, gone. The items combined were worth about $3,000, all stolen.
It's extremely ironic that our house is decorated with the Grinch this year, and he came in and stole Christmas.
The December 2022 winter storm came with the lowest temperatures Nashville's seen since 1996. Around 50,000 people did not have power.
Added insulation where we found that it was needed. We've added some enclosures and closed some piping and some instrumentation that was vulnerable to the storm.
TVA has also upgraded pumps and motors, and in the last 3 months, invested nearly $123 million to prepare for extreme winter weather. Last year, Music City also had 10-minute rolling blackouts, which hit every 1 to 2 hours.
I discovered that there were some issues and some things we could do better as far as communicating not only with our local power companies, but with the public. So we've had meetings, we've had drills.
Brooks says the intention is for the entire fleet to be able to operate in weather conditions of up to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit and 20-mile-per-hour winds for at least 48 hours.
roads were washing out, cars were getting pushed off the road. It looked like a lot of the lower level condos were flooded.
Sunday River says ski operations will reopen as quickly as possible and snowmaking will resume once repairs are made, but no word yet on when they can reopen.
Very concerned for the ski season and mostly the employees that work there and depend on that every year.
Harry Decker has friends who work at Sunday River. His basement flooded when the Androscoggin River reached near record high levels. Have you ever seen the water this high?
Never. And we've had a lot of people down here that have been here for 60, 70 years in the area, and they've never seen it this high either.
About 75% of the homes here in Bethel still have no electricity. CMP crews couldn't even reach many homes and businesses here because of the flooded and washed out roads.
I just came down to see if I could paddle across and then heard that there's live wires.
We all live on little islands now, so we just can't get anywhere.
Still ahead here on the National Desk, saving Christmas. Just hours before a toy giveaway, a church was destroyed by fire. Find out who came to help those in need. Generous donations saved a Christmas for many families after a devastating church fire. The fire destroyed the Victory Outreach Church in Pomona, California, hours before a planned toy giveaway. But local charities and firefighters showed up with toys in the afternoon to help those families. The need for help is being felt by countless families across the country this holiday season. Nonprofits held an annual food and toy giveaway in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the state's food insecurity rate is more than 14%, roughly 2% above the national average.
Inflation is high, and you're struggling between, hey, am I going to pay an electric bill or get food? That's a real deal. And then when you bring Christmas to the effect, and you want to make sure your kids have a good Christmas, all that pressure is really real. And so, yeah, anywhere people can get help, we want to help that relief and let people have a good holiday season.
The group said they handed out more than 8,500 toys to more than 5,000 children in one county. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National Desk. I'm Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, happy holidays.